New Orleans and the immoral behavior that they have been conducting in this city that has been seasoned and saturated with corruption. And so what we have been doing as an organization is standing up for every citizen of this community, saying it's not going to be tolerated any longer. It's time. It's the 300th anniversary of this city, and we're not going to take it anymore. Amen? I'm not going to preach. You got to throw amen in there every once in a while. But that's what we're doing. And tonight, we're going to have a presentation by some very knowledgeable people about this entire issue. There are in buckets on either side of the stage. You'll be able to ask questions, but we ask that you submit your question by way of writing it on these index cards that are next to those buckets and dropping them off in those buckets. The moderators will collect them, and we will ask those questions at the designated time. But at any time during the presentation, please feel free to get up, write a question on that index card, and drop it in there. Must say one more word about the food tonight. It's been really wonderfully prepared. We hope that you enjoyed it. We hope that you will contribute to the fund to get more food. Also want to say a word about Mr. Chuck Perkins, who is so gracious in hosting us in this place. He also thought it would be nice if we had some bling bling going on tonight. So we're so pleased to have that. So with no further ado, I want to invite tonight to the stage our presenters, Miss Monique Harden and also Miss Logan Burke. Please come to the stage. We welcome you. We thank you for presenting to us this very important issue on tonight. Yes. That's good. Yes. Test 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. We all good? Test 1, 2. I'll get the other one. Test 1, 2. Yeah, much better. Thanks, Chuck. All right, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Pastor Manning. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Monique Harden. I'm an attorney here in New Orleans, and I work with the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice. We're an organization that's been around since 1992. We're opened our new office in New Orleans East at Lake Forest Boulevard. It's a training center for people to enter environmental careers, and it's also a place where we do our research and advocacy work to enable communities that are burdened with pollution and other forms of injustice affecting their environment, climate, and health to be able to in a self-determined way, make change, policy, system-wide change, and building the capacity and knowledge to do that. So I wanted to go over with you some of the work that's taking place in protecting our city from Entergy's proposed gas plant. And all of this, for the most part, is taking place in two places. The chamber of the City Council at City Hall, and next door at the Orleans Parish Civil District Courthouse. There are two lawsuits currently pending. Both are against our City Council for its approval of the Entergy gas plant and conducting public meetings in a way that shut the public out with locked doors, not taking in comment cards, people left standing for hours, some leaving in frustration without exercising the right they have under our Constitution to be able to have any comment and input as on the City Council's decision. I'm going to focus my talk, for the most part, on what's on the appeal of the City Council's decision to approve the gas plant proposed by Entergy. Just a few other items to know. The plaintiffs in the open meetings lawsuit include the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, 350 New Orleans, Sierra Club, Vela New Orleans, and individuals Renata Hurich, our projectionist, and Mr. Ted Kwan. In the appeal, the plaintiffs are the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, the Alliance for Affordable Energy, 350 New Orleans, and Sierra Club. Susan Stevens-Miller, raise your hand, Susan, is here from Washington, D.C. She's a fabulous attorney and just a tremendous expert on how utilities ought to be regulated. And she's a co-counsel in both of those lawsuits, and we're so glad that she's represented the Alliance and so many other organizations, and really keeping this fight alive at Orleans Parish Civil District Courthouse. All right, so we're going to go to the next slide, Ms. Urich. So there's been an interesting update in the course of this litigation. As you might know, the City Council had commissioned a special investigation of Entergy's paid use of professional actors to show sham support to the City Council that they were, regular residents in favor of this gas plant when they were performing for Entergy, reading from scripts and signing non-disclosure agreements and the like. And in the course of this investigative report, and Logan Burke is going to go into more detail about that, it was revealed that Entergy saw itself as being at war with all of us in New Orleans. And the tactics and maneuvers that they took on a war footing, seeing New Orleanians as enemies, is something she's going to talk about, but it really underlies and frames all that we're dealing with in terms of fighting this gas plant. At a special meeting of the City Council on October 31st, the investigative report was presented, and the City Council had a draft resolution that proposed penalties. The penalties basically pared down to a $5 million fine, which would be a pittance, a drop in the bucket, a hand slap, wrist slap, a gift to Entergy, and also requiring Entergy executive staff to go through ethics training. All the while, Entergy has refused to give over 70 documents that it was subpoenaed to give. All the while, Entergy executives in public statements continue to deny their role in paying these actors to fake support and deceive the council and the public. At the conclusion of the meeting, there were some special remarks that many of the council members gave, and two of them were quite noteworthy, and I want to go over that with you. And it looks like there may be, a change in their position. Since the March 2018 vote of the City Council to approve the gas plant, two members carried over, were re-elected to the new City Council that was seated in May. Those members were Jason Williams and Jared Rossett. And as more and more news began to mount and information was being exposed about the paid actors, they voiced the position of the City Council that somehow or another their decision was valid. That might be changing, because this is what they said towards the end of the special meeting. Council President Jason Williams, he said, "I think, as a person who voted in favor of this plant, that we still need to have a conversation about whether or not we need to have another vote. I plan on meeting with my colleagues and to discuss the next steps because I don't think our work is done here yet." His comment was immediately followed by Jared Rossett, who said, "After hearing today that after many months of discussion and debate in the public, I am too open to re-voting on this matter. And I'd like to hear my colleagues on that as well." So the pressure is, the door is open for us to move the next step. Now that you've spoken, expressed your view that you might want to have a re-vote, I think it's really up to all of us to make sure it happens. So now we're going to talk about the appeal. On November 20th, next slide please. Thank you. On November 20th, please mark your calendars, at 10 o'clock in the morning, Judge Piper Griffin will be holding a hearing on the appeal. And at this hearing, you will hear Susan, myself, on behalf of the petitioners, residents of New Orleans, organizations in New Orleans, give argument, and you'll also hear the attorneys representing the City Council present their arguments orally, and attorneys for Entergy, which has intervened in the case. And so that will take place on November 20th at 10 o'clock at the Orleans Parish Civil District Court on Loyola Avenue. So what is that council decision all about? When they said that they approved the gas plant, what did they really approve and how did they go about it? Well, I want to focus on a couple of things. Our City Council has a very unique position that no other city government or city lawmaking body has, which is it gets to regulate the utility company. If you look around the United States, that job is left at the state level to public service commissions or public utility commissions. They have varying names. So if you move outside of New Orleans, you'll see that the Louisiana Public Service Commission, seated in Baton Rouge, regulates utility companies happening everywhere outside of the city of New Orleans within the state of Louisiana. So that unique role and responsibility of the council means that they have to be accountable to the people who elected them, right? And it also means, as a legal matter, that their decisions on Entergy have to be in the public interest. That includes the gas plant application that Entergy submitted to the City Council. Along with this legal responsibility comes other responsibilities that protect our basic fundamental rights to a fair process, a neutral decision maker, that decision maker being the City Council. They have to be neutral in making that determination. It also means that we have a right to a reasonable decision. A decision should not be arbitrary or capricious. It shouldn't disregard facts and evidence and information. And we also have a right to a decision that complies with other city laws that are on the books. Unfortunately, next slide, or next, none of that was done here. And I want to go into detail about that. So with regards to being denied the right to a fair process, what happened here? The City Council has a group of people who they pay about $7 million of our tax dollars to, called advisors, utility advisors. And so this comprises a law firm and an engineering firm, all out of state. And what their job is to advise the City Council on how to regulate Entergy at $7 million a year. And so when Entergy filed its gas application, the City Council opened a trial-like proceeding with a docket number and laid out a schedule of how testimony would be raised, how people within the trial-like proceeding, including groups like the Alliance for Affordable Energy and Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, could ask questions and get discovery from Entergy and how Entergy should respond and a schedule of time for doing so. So within that trial-like proceeding, the City Council also designated its advisors as a party to the proceeding. And what wound up happening is that the advisors recommended the gas plant that the council ultimately approved as a party. What also happened was that the advisors wrote the decision of the City Council's approval. So if you ever heard that phrase, judge, jury, and executioner, you've got the advisors being an adversarial party in a trial-like proceeding and also writing the judgment. So that denies your basic right to due process. That requires a fair process. And you can't have a fair process in a trial-like proceeding if you have one party being an advocate as well as a decision maker. Secondly, the City Council has a responsibility of being a neutral decision maker. That means fair and unbiased. What we have found out in the course of this litigation is that our City Council and Entergy entered into a binding agreement for a peaking plant, much like what Entergy was approved, years before Entergy even applied for it. And the council never disclosed it. So what we have there is with the agreement that the City Council and Entergy locked themselves into and agreeing to a gas plant in New Orleans some years before Entergy even filed an application before the City Council, and keeping the public completely in the dark about it is a huge due process issue. It means that we did not have a neutral, fair decision maker on our City Council. Third, we all have a right to a decision from the City Council that's reasonable. Well, unfortunately, in this situation, the decision by the council is based on an incomplete and flawed record. One of the things that the City Council required Entergy to do was to do a complete and full analysis of alternatives to the gas plant. You know what Entergy did? None of it. And you know what the City Council did with their advisors in tow? Approved the plant anyway. So without this analysis of alternatives, how can you say this is the best option in the public interest of New Orleans? You can't. But they did it anyway, and that's why we're suing them. There are other aspects of the record that are incomplete and flawed, but I think that is the most telling example of just how we are. Like, how can you approve a gas plant without any analysis of other options? Even when they were required to do so, they didn't do it, and the city council allowed that to happen. And last, a decision that complies with city laws. Did you know that the city council approval actually violates other city ordinances and resolution orders? Like, that's like, these are your laws. This is not a state law or a federal law. This is what you all passed into law. So what are those laws? One of the laws is called Flood Damage Prevention Ordinance. And before Entergy filed this application for the gas plant, this ordinance was put into effect as a way of our city being in compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program and FEMA standards around elevation for new construction, whether it's a home or non-residential building. And what the record shows is that Entergy didn't know that this, or said that they didn't know that this ordinance existed, and they set up an elevation that it does not comply with the ordinance. When this was brought to the attention of the city council and their advisors, they had the same treatment that they did to the lack of any alternatives not being analyzed, which was, oh well. And so that's a huge problem, because what it means is that this gas plant, the way in which it's set for construction, would mean that it would be that much more vulnerable to floods. In addition, it's placed in a location that FEMA has designated as a high-risk flood hazard area. And FEMA policies under the National Flood Insurance Program actually caution against, discourage against constructing power plants, which they consider critical facilities, and they are, in a special flood hazard area. Again, that was also ignored by the city council in its approval decision. Ignored in terms of that they have to comply with it. The utility standard of practice is that you don't need FEMA. Companies around the country are moving substations, finding alternative site locations for their power supply equipment. They don't want to be in a special flood hazard, a high-risk flood hazard area. We are spending, the council has put us in a situation of spending over $210 million for a gas plant that will go in an area that the first storm surge will wipe it out, like it did the Michoud plant that was out of commission for 8 months after Hurricane Katrina. This makes no sense. And so when Entergy talks about, well, we need reliable service, then why would you put it in the most unreliable place, right? And when Entergy talks about reliable service, then why aren't you doing anything about the distribution system where wires, lines, and substations go snap, crackle, pop every other day? And where I live, we had 3 hours of outage. And on a personal note, we were really panicked that we would miss Rick's last episode on Walking Dead. But the lights came on at 7:32 p.m. and we praised the Lord, turned on the cable, and had a good evening as we had planned to. But that was, yes, but it was touch and go there. We didn't know what we were going to do. So those are two ordinances that require reliable utility service and also flood damage prevention. There are also resolution orders. The council, has enacted these ordinances. They've also passed resolution orders. If you ever look at a city council resolution, it has a lot of whereas clauses. When you get beyond the whereas, there's a now therefore, be it so, and then what comes after that is called the order of the resolution. This is the part that has the real legal effect. And in resolutions dealing with the Entergy gas plant, the council had set an order establishing that social justice issues related to the gas plant would be vetted. And that wasn't the case. Instead, they were refuted, disputed, argued against, but they weren't really vetted. No one acknowledged the fact that this gas plant would add to the racially disproportionate burdens we have of pollution in the state of Louisiana. By bringing this gas plant in close proximity to African American and Vietnamese American residents, the schools where students attend, Latinx students and residents as well. And so that issue around social justice also includes the impact of this gas plant on low-income residents and households in New Orleans. Did you know that low-income families in New Orleans are ranked the city of New Orleans, I should say, is ranked second in the United States for the largest bite out of the income of low-income households that pay for electric and gas bills. Memphis is number 1, New Orleans is number 2. And what this study looks at is just the population. How many low-income people do you have? And then how much is their average electric bill? And what does that mean in terms of percentage of their earnings, their income? And in New Orleans, it's the second highest in the country. So we've got a major social injustice in terms of what this another gas plant adding more to that bill would look like, especially when you haven't even considered alternatives that can be lower cost, that can bring down the cost of the use of electricity, that can bring down the cost of bills, that can help people generate their own energy with solar energy and battery storage, upgrading our transmission system. These are all viable alternatives that were not given their full measure of analysis because I believe they're better than the gas plant Entergy proposed. And I'll just end on this note. In some ways, as I've been thinking through this ever since the investigative report, it feels, it very closely mirrors the situation in the movie A Few Good Men. How many people saw that movie? You Can't Handle the Truth, Jack Nicholson, Tom Cruise. And remember, the question that kind of revealed all was establishing first that Jack Nicholson, as the commanding officer, whatever he said goes. There's no question about it. And so why was it that a person serving within his command had to have a special, extra precautionary order and protection if, in fact, his order could mean what it meant, right? This guy would be protected and safe, and no other soldier, service person can harm him. The same thing kind of works out here. If Entergy, if we were to believe the city council, at least the statements that they were making earlier on since their approval, that their decision was so right, that it was based on the best evidentiary record, all supporting this gas plant, why would Entergy take this next step of getting paid actors in the room? And I think it really portends what we know to be the case, that the record does not support an approval whatsoever. And that there were, in instances of public meetings, it was clear that Entergy had no support for the gas plant. If people came to the meeting, they were coming to oppose it, and for good reason. And so wherever you kind of shake out this gas plant issue in terms of, is it in the public interest? Is there public support? The answers are no and no. And so we're hoping that you all can come out on November 20th to see what happens at the court hearing when oral arguments are presented. Please share this information with folks you know, because this affects all of us in New Orleans, because this is really beyond a gas plant at this point. It's the kind of accountability we want from our city council, and it's really about a democratic process that respects us, each and every one of us. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Before we move on to Logan, I do want to remind everyone that there are index cards on the stage with buckets. If you want to put your questions into those buckets, it will be answered in just a little bit. Logan?
So, I am going to talk a little bit about the investigation itself, but frankly, it's out there, it's in the public, and there's plenty to see. The media has definitely eaten it. But what I really want to talk about is what we can do about it. As Monique says, last week at the October 31st special meeting of the full council in response to the investigative report coming out, the council decided to pass a resolution that opens up what's called a show cause proceeding. And what this means is that for the next 30 days following the vote on that resolution, Entergy gets to argue why they shouldn't be fined $5 million and required to attend some ethics classes. In that same 30 days, the public has an opportunity to explain to the council why this isn't enough. And this isn't the solution, the remedy to the harms that were caused, not only by the actors who Entergy paid, but also by the actions that Entergy took throughout the process. But as Monique has described, it isn't just about the actions that Entergy took. It's also about the actions that the council and their advisors took over the course of all of these couple of years. And so, luckily, the council made it very clear that they are at least interested in hearing from the community. And so on their website, although it was taken down today, and I'm fighting to get it back up, on the council's new website, there is some instruction about what you can do to provide more information. Now, the Alliance, along with surely some of the other organizations in the room, will be preparing some pretty in-depth comments to the council's requests. Not only, yes, this isn't enough, this isn't this isn't the right remedy, but here is why. And one of those things is, the council has made it clear over the last few years that they're interested in moving further on renewables. The council has made it clear, as a result of lots of people speaking out, that we really need to solve our distribution reliability issues. And yet Entergy hasn't been moving on these. Now, the resolution that the council passed, asking for Entergy to pay $5 million, doesn't just apply that $5 million fine to their problem with the actors. It also asks for these dollars to be applied to their problems related to slow-walking renewables and slow-walking solving the distribution problem and filing a rate case asking for a tremendous increase. So basically, this resolution that they passed bundles all of these problems together and asks us as a community, is $5 million enough? Is that enough? And I think the answer is no. And so one of the things, as I mentioned, we will be filing some comments, and we would love to hear from you if you are also interested in joining along with our comments. I've got Sophie right there in the middle. She can hand out some cards. If you are interested, you can email us and let us know that you want to join that filing. In addition, if you have other things to say that you think we're not going to cover, you can also file comments with the City Council via 4 different ways. You can file a letter with the Clerk of Council. That one is the most public because that one will show up directly on the Council's agenda, on the consent agenda. Another way is to send a letter to the Curo office, and we can provide that address. You can provide an email to the Curo office, or you can call the Curo office. Now, I recommend, and I would say that those are kind of in the order of the Curo is the Council Utility Regulatory Office, which is it's an in-city council sort of staff that is intended to support the council's regulatory work. Now, in lots of other places, a staff or a regulator is a group of public servants who do the job of analyzing and helping the regulator conduct their work to make sure that the utility is conducting itself fairly and affordably and so on. Unfortunately, as Monique mentioned, we've been paying some pretty high prices for some advisors who are not here in New Orleans and who have not been giving our City Council very good advice. And so the City Council has said that they are interested in beefing up the engagement of the Council Utility Regulatory Office, or CURO. And this is actually one of the first things that we've seen them give to the CURO office to support their work. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about with this investigation is what it did not include. And I think this is really important. When the council put forth the call for either attorneys or judges, whomever would conduct the investigation, they asked that these investigators look into all of the public meetings around this gas plant, including the February 21st and the March 8th meetings. Now, much of the investigative report refers to the October of 2017 meeting. Now, that was the first meeting that all of the big orange t-shirts showed up. That was the first meeting that it was pretty clear something fishy was up. And the investigative report goes into quite a bit of detail about each speaker. They go into their IMDb page, which is their actor credentials. They go into what it is they said, but they don't ever really go into the same kind of depth at the two meetings where the council members made actual decisions. And why this is so frustrating is that one of these meetings in particular is really the subject of this open meetings lawsuit. And what's further, it's an issue that the investigators actually went to the community who was locked out and asked for more information. And yet none of that information was included in the investigative report. And so what this means is we're getting sort of a watered down report when it comes to the issue at hand, which is who was harmed, and therefore how do we solve the harm. And so without the council actually having that information in front of them, all of the information, personal accounts from the individuals who live in New Orleans East who came in to the Central Business District to listen and take part, the fact that not only does this investigative report not cover it, but then the remedy that the council is proposing doesn't cure it. And so what we're suggesting is that this opportunity that the council has given us to offer our comment really dig into that and really make it clear what the harms are and what the real remedies are. Obviously, we believe that at least one of the real remedies is to pull back this original vote to approve the plant, to take a really hard look at a utility who has seriously undermined their credibility in this entire process, and to move forward with a real clear and clean process that deals with a lot of the issues that are outlined in the appeal, including the judge and executioner issue, including the FEMA flood area issue, and so on. And so we really encourage you, if you're interested in letting the council hear your voice, you can follow up with us either via email. If you don't get a card, you can always email us at info@allforenergy.org. But you can also check out all these documents on our website. That's all4energy.org. We have the resolution, we have all of the appeals documents, and we have the investigative documents. I'm going to wrap that up there and ask if people have questions.
All right, we're going to take some questions. Thank you, Logan. Thank you, Monique. Oh, real quick before we go to the questions from the moderators, the sanctions, the $5 million. I understand there is a way that people can chime in on how that $5 million should, where that should go for the greater good of the community. How can people do that to tell the city council what that should go toward?
Sure. So that same 30-day window that we're in right now, meaning comments that are due, that we will be filing, that $5 million just doesn't cut it. Within that same period, you can also comment, as the pastor has said, how $5 million at least should be spent. And so you may recommend to the council, for example, that those $5 million be given back specifically for a program, or directly through your bills as an on-bill credit, or held in an account for a particular vulnerable population. There are all kinds of ways that these dollars could be spent. But one thing that's really important is that those dollars, if indeed the council does find Entergy, that those dollars aren't held for Entergy to give out at whatever timeline they choose. Because right now, the resolution doesn't express a definitive timeline, meaning Entergy could give 100,000 this year or 100,000 next year. You see my point. So it's really important that if they are to be fined, that those dollars should happen right up front and that customers really receive the benefit right away.
Can I also add that the whole $5 million as a figure should be just rejected, right? Because how much did Entergy spend on donations to organizations in 1 year long?
$6 million.
15 million. So $5 million would be a gift to Entergy.
Can't call it a donation, it's required.
I think, well, then you can bring that up with IRS. You can make a whole other IRS complaint on Entergy then.
Okay, we have the first question. What financial contribution has Entergy made to the political campaign of city council members?
So the City Council of New Orleans has some voluntary rules that they've passed over the last, I'd say, 7 or 8 years. And those rules require that sitting council members are not allowed to accept campaign finance or campaign donations from anybody at Entergy or any of their advisors. Now, that doesn't keep incoming or challenging council members, those who are running, from accepting campaign funds. It's been fairly difficult to, because of less than transparent campaign funds sort of moving, to say exactly how those dollars have been spent. But what we understand is that dollars have definitely been spent with at least 2 sitting council members via contracts, but those are outside the campaign fund. Sorry. Okay, so the dollars that we know have been spent on contracts with sitting council members are with Council Member Banks in District B and Council Member Wynn in District E.
Okay.
She's writing it down.
The next question is, why was the scope of the investigation so limited to the paid actors? And what about all the other unfair and questionable issues, such as payments to consultants, fixing the vote, and non-profit, etc.?
The answer is because that's how the city council voted on it. Now, but at a meeting in which they heard from myself and other members from the community saying that the scope should be widened to also include themselves and their staff and advisors. And so that limited scope comes directly from this current city council.
Okay, so what can we do as citizens of New Orleans to make sure that it's expanded? The scope is expanded.
Demand.
Okay, like petition-wise?
Sure. So a good step would be in the process that Logan has provided on the input, so you can offer problems you see with the investigation having a limited scope, and you can go from there. And then, speak about what the investigation should have also included, and that you want to see that happen. That as Entergy isn't going away tomorrow. I mean, they removed the CEO, put him in the law department, but it's still the same company. And all of this wasn't on him. He was doing a corporate job, right? So this corporation is still here with us. And so expanding this investigation, including that, and ideas for what that could look like could be part of your comment. But then, I don't have to tell you guys at Justice and Beyond that, you need to organize around it.
Yes. And we do plan to.
I want to make a comment about your last statement, Monique, too, that, Entergy would love to throw Charles Rice under the bus. And we're not by any means, condoning his behavior, but we don't want to limit it to a Charles Rice issue. It goes much deeper than that. Entergy's not going to get out of it that easily. Correct.
Okay, another question was, what was the social cost of carving news? Not to have a discussion of the price is climate denial.
So in the modeling, what is being described here as the social cost of carbon is what it actually costs us in terms of health, in terms of loss of land, in terms of sea level rise, and so on. What it really means to burn fossil fuels and create carbon emissions. Those costs are additional to the cost of the fuel itself, the plant itself, and so on. In coming up with modeling in energy planning, very often the U.S. government used to use, not right now, but used to use in each of its agencies, a cost of carbon to say that we are acknowledging that there is a cost. There is a cost to our climate and to the people who live near these plants. And these costs would be applied when you look at the analysis of how much this thing costs versus that thing. And this thing might be a gas plant, and this thing might be a solar field, something like that. And Entergy, in their last IRP, which they used to try and support the idea of this power plant, used only a cost of carbon of 0, not acknowledging that there were any additional costs to burning natural gas or drilling for natural gas or any of that, not acknowledging that there were any actual social, personal, health, economic, safety, reliability, resilience costs as a result of burning those fossil fuels.
In other words, they didn't care and didn't put it down on paper, how much stuff costs.
It's climate denial.
That's it. And the city council approved it.
They're climate deniers.
Yes, and in fact, despite the fact that, as Monique mentioned, the city council's vote on this thing was in direct opposition to some of their own resolutions and orders, including votes that they made to support a climate action strategy that insists that gas is not a good source of energy for New Orleans if we want to have a climate action strategy. It countervenes their vote to stick with the Paris Climate Agreement. It is absolutely a denial to not model a social cost, to not acknowledge it, and then to go ahead and approve and plan to build a gas plant is absolutely a denial of the facts.
It's climate denial.
It is climate denial.
We're underwater.
Thank you. The next question is, what is the rational for current regulatory scheme versus efficiency improvement, including renewable storage and distribution to support?
We would love to see that rationale. I mean, that's part of what the lawsuit is that a decision should be based on stacking them all together and seeing how they shake out in terms of costs and benefits of all of these options that are laid out in the question. And what we have instead is Entergy shirking its responsibility under a council order to do that analysis, and the council, along with its advisors, allowing it to get away with it. That's central to this lawsuit, the appeal that we filed that will have a court hearing on November 20th.
Thank you. Another question. After November the 20th and the judge renders her decision, where do the rest of New Orleans stand to be included in the lawsuit? Because it affects everyone in New Orleans, correct?
That's correct.
So then the next steps would be to then try to make it out of a class action lawsuit or something? What are the next steps once it's approved?
Well, once it's approved.
Well, you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying.
Tell me what you know,
She's
Sylvia. Let's
speaking
hear
in
it
our
out.
favor.
Okay, so the way it works is that this appeal is a quote unquote an appeal from the city council's approval, but this is the first initial lawsuit. Depending on how the judge rules, there may be an appeal of that decision that would go to the Fourth Circuit Court, and there's ultimately the Supreme Court, Justice Bernard Johnson sitting there along with other justices from around the state. So those are the course of the litigation that's open and available to us in not one but both lawsuits. In terms of how other people can get involved in the lawsuit, the plaintiffs are who they are, and I listed them, and so those are the folks, a couple of individuals and organizations that are driving the lawsuit. One way to do it would be become a member of one of those plaintiff organizations if you can. And I'm sure they would love to have you, and that would be great to bring up recruitment. It would be great to have 400,000 residents in all these organizations. A little hard to manage, but I think it would be a lot of fun, a big adventure to figure it all out. But so that's what we have with the litigation. And I should just hasten to add that we should not lose sight of the accountability that the city council has to all of us as residents of the city to recast, rework, rethink, reconsider, withdraw their vote, and withdraw their decision. And so there should be, that's a great opportunity for the public to really get involved, because that's where you have a direct relationship with those decision makers. That's outside of the court, but it can be even more impactful and powerful than the decision of a judge. And in fact, if it goes the right way with withdrawing the decision, it would have an effect of kind of canceling those lawsuits because we're seeking, as a remedy in each and every one of those lawsuits, that the council withdraw its approval.
And is that legally an option for the council? They can reverse themselves?
Absolutely. In fact, those two quotes I gave you is the two people who were the hardliners holding on to the old approval decision, saying, maybe we can revote. Let's talk to the new council members and see how that could work out. So that's where everyone else can be on the phone saying, you better do it, and emailing and getting people together and meeting with the council members and telling them why that's an important thing to do.
Didn't they do it already on the boycott decision?
Just as a point of order, just so we can keep order in the room, please submit your questions by way of index card. We try to keep order that way. Not that anybody who's speaking out loud is being unruly. We do want to keep order and keep according to our code of conduct. So those questions can be asked through the index cards. But just a note too, just one comment. Opponents too are organizing around the gas plant. Some opponents would say this is just a New Orleans East issue. And they would say that, and can you tell us why really in relation, as it relates to billing and the rates of all citizens in New Orleans, why this is not just a New Orleans East issue?
So, anything that Entergy builds, anything, a gas plant, a pole, a wire, we all pay for that. It doesn't matter if it is in your neighborhood. It doesn't matter if it's a gas plant that they bought that's in Arkansas. We all pay for everything, including the fuel, including the taxes and the people who do the work. And a profit margin on top. A nice, tidy profit margin on top. In fact, Entergy New Orleans currently has the highest profit margin of any Entergy company. And so, please.
With that, and that should be, that you should look at that as a sign of the city council isn't regulating Entergy. Entergy is writing the check and the city council signs it. And that's because we as a people, as a public, need to be more present, more vocal, more aware, of what's going on. There's no way Entergy can have that level of profit in a city as poor as New Orleans if we were involved in it. Right? It's not just privatization, it's our responsibility to participate. Without us, this is what happens. The city council doesn't feel accountable to us on Entergy. When they run for office, they never talk about the role they have to regulate Entergy, or any other utility for that matter. And so when the time comes for decisions, we are not in those rooms at 10 o'clock in the morning on Thursday. It's Entergy executives, the Alliance for Affordable Energy, some of their board members, some of their members, but it's a small handful. And it's not, and so more of us need to get involved, because this gas plant is a done deal. That's right? And this whole application was just sort of a dance to make it look all right, and yeah, we got some public meetings, and wait a minute, people are coming out opposing, what are we going to do? Let's get some paid actors in the room, let's do all kinds of craziness. And so we should be looking at this as a new way of dealing with our city council. They need to be seeing us more often, they need to be hearing from us more often, because Entergy, as a Fortune 500 company, is really exploiting many of us in the city of New Orleans. And just no other better way to say that. Well, there are other ways I could say it, but I'll just leave it as exploiting. With the pastor here. Okay? All right, sorry.
So one other thing I wanted to mention of why should this matter, and this is going to go back to billing. I mentioned a power plant in Arkansas. Back in 2015, Entergy New Orleans was approved to acquire an not terribly old, but fairly large natural gas power plant that is in Arkansas. And when they were approved to buy it, it was told, both through the media and through their filings and to the council, that it wouldn't cost customers more than $5 a month, that no customer would be expected to pay more for that plant than generally $5 a month. Now that sounds pretty familiar, right? That's exactly what they're saying about this gas plant. Now, what happened with Union is that power plant wound up costing us more like $15 a month on our bills. And the reason for that was there was analysis that wasn't done, there was information that was withheld, and a decision was made according to only what Entergy was willing to say and provide to the council. And so this is one of those reasons. This happened so recently, and the council hasn't been willing to say, oh, well, maybe they don't have their numbers right. Because in this gas plant situation, they are assuming that in order for it to only cost us $5 a month, the market has to increase by 16,000%. Those are the actual numbers they're using to make it work out to $5 a month for us all. And so this absolutely matters to everyone who lives in New Orleans. One of the issues that came up, that is in the appeal, that came up during the process was, will the city council, as a regulator, put a condition on this plant? So if they're saying this plant is only going to cost us $5 a month, or if they're saying it's only going to cost $210 million to build, fine. That's as much as you're allowed. You're not allowed to charge us more than $5 a month. You're not allowed to build it for more than $210 million. If it's more, you eat it. Well, we proposed this to the council, and it was actually starting to get a little bit of traction there. And instead of the council moving forward on it, instead of Entergy saying, okay, as a regulator, let's see how we can work on this, instead, they received a letter from Entergy's CEO saying, absolutely not, we will not do this, this is not fair, I'm going to stop my feet. And so the council
Port of New Orleans wants to lease that land for any industrial taker. So not only would you be bringing more pollution to New Orleans East, you would be taking away a very vital resource we need against hurricane protection that protects the entire city, those wetlands. Then there was this plan afoot to change the comprehensive zoning ordinance that we have in New Orleans that lays out what kind of development, what kind of land uses are allowed, in all of the council districts, neighborhood to neighborhood. Instead, it would carve out this one exception for special New Orleans East that would turn areas that are designated for what's called business parks into areas that would allow industrial development. And when you looked at the areas that were mapped out for it, more of the undeveloped wetlands. New Orleans East holds 97% or so of wetlands we have in the Orleans Parish. It's all in New Orleans East. And so we saw that with the Entergy gas plant, it's the tip of the iceberg in terms of where people who do not meet with us, from the people who run the port and benefit from the kind of decision-making that the port does that really caters to industrial interests. And then those that are looking to industrialize other parts of New Orleans East that the port does not own are all looking to come in and grab the land and put some smokestack on top of it that once was wetland areas. And these are areas that are, right next door to homes, schools, places of worship, right next to neighborhoods going the entire span of New Orleans East. At this point in time, I can tell you that we've got the gas plant on hold with the litigation. We were able to stop the plan that would industrialize areas through that business park change in the comprehensive zoning ordinance for now. It'll come back, be sure about that. But we were not able to stop the Port of New Orleans on trying to change those areas to wetlands. And so they were able to change that in the master plan. That gets revised every 4 or 5 years, so there's another opportunity to come back at it. But in the meantime, we're kind of vigilant around an industrial company or developer looking for, zoning, land use, other kinds of permitting set-asides where we would have to bring the fight to. So it's going to be on a case by, individual basis as opposed to preventing the Port of New Orleans from turning those entire large, hundreds and hundreds of acres of wetlands over for industrial development. So that's kind of where we are right now. But New Orleans East is a place where industrial companies have taken up all that they can in other parts of Cancer Alley, and this is looking like a good spot for them. And we've got to make them know that this is a place where people live, that they call home, it's a community, and it should stay that way.
Thank you. I don't think we can. Okay, this question says, is this corruption? Will it come to light? And if evidence comes to light, will it be followed?
Yes, it's corruption. It is coming to light in the public record, in the documents we filed in court are a matter of public record. What I laid out to you about this prior agreement is a form of corruption. Having the agreement, first of all, is crazy. Not disclosing it is even crazier. What has brought to your attention that this is a problem, you try to strike from the record all testimony about it as a city council, and now we're in court on it. So I would love for more people to know about this prior agreement, more people to talk to this, especially the 5 new members who had nothing to do with this, about are you going to be standing by what the former city council did and having a prior deal that predetermined the outcome. Let me just say this about the prior deal. This is what it said years before Entergy filed the application. That the City Council and Entergy commit to doing the following. Pursuing the development of peaking generation in New Orleans with Michoud or the Paterson site. Paterson is right next door to Michoud, well, kind of next door to, it's right in the vicinity of Michoud. Michoud or Paterson as the potential sites for the gas plant. Which one did they approve? Michoud. The agreement also said, years before Entergy filed the application, that this peaking generation should have a capacity of 120 or so, of at least 120 megawatts. How many did the council approve? 128. And that it should serve as a peaking plant, which is what Entergy has applied for and approved. So it's a mirror image, this agreement, that before anybody heard anything about a gas plant, right? Tucked away, never disclosed by the council at any of the public meetings, and any of the resolutions, that, hey, we've got this prior deal with Entergy, y'all should know about it. Never, not a word. So it's like a predetermined outcome, that you made this deal with Entergy, you got to bed with them, and here's your approval. So if that's not corruption, Jesus, I don't know what yet.
This question says, will the recent council district meetings on climate equity be relevant in any way to this issue?
So yes, that climate action strategy that the previous administration put out and actually approved by an executive order, that this city council, the prior city council approved via a resolution saying we agree to this and we're going to reduce our emissions dramatically, are all part of a need and a plan to reduce those emissions and to better protect our city. Now, if they are saying, yeah, but we're also going to invest all your money in a gas plant, well, they're inextricably linked, because you can't say one and do the other. And so, as these meetings throughout the city, these equity, climate and equity project meetings, were intended to hear from people on the ground, not only what kinds of problems are you dealing with, but what do you want to see. At lots of the meetings that I attended, I heard problems I'm dealing with are my bill is going up, and if we're not thinking strategically about climate change, and your bills are going to go up, climate change really in New Orleans means hotter and more humid. How do we deal with that? We wind up cranking the AC, and we live in these homes that aren't dealing with that excessive energy use and then waste. And so if we're not actually responding to and adapting to, and at the same time mitigating the climate impacts, then we're certainly not doing what we're saying we're going to do, what our council is approving, is resolving to do, and we're not responding to the people who are actually coming to these public meetings and saying what they want and what they're experiencing.
If I could just say one thing on that, is that on one of the days that we had a climate and equity community forum in the lower ninth ward was on the same day that the International Panel of Climate Scientists had released the report saying, okay, planet Earth and all people on it, you've got 12 years to bring your emissions of the greenhouse gases, carbon, methane, and the like down. And if you don't, we're really in for some horrendous climate conditions that are just it's going to kill people. And it's going to change the way those of us who survive are able to live. And at the community forum, I can tell you that the idea around having a future focus on this is extremely important, because you had elders in the room saying, this is about my grandchildren. This is about what we do now to protect them. And we also had high school students in it from the science class who were there, the MLK school. And they were talking about what they would like to see done and get involved in, and what they were already doing through their various volunteer groups within the community. So our city council, what are they doing, right? This is another place for community engagement and demand and participation and organizing, is that what are we doing as a city to bring our energy emissions down, so that we can be matched with other city efforts, other state efforts, other country efforts taking place. The last thing I want to say on that, there was something about, could you repeat the question one more time? Okay, will the recent gas council distribute? No, that's not it. There's another thought I had, I just lost it. Well, it'll probably come back. Okay, something about, was it relevant? Is it going to be taken? Okay, it says, will the recent council district meetings on climate equity be relevant in any way to this issue? All right, let's move on, sorry. Okay. All right, so, we have two more. Did the council not already reverse itself once this year on the boycott and divest resolution?
I think what Janice and that card are referring to were a vote from the council related to the divest movement, related to I don't remember the name of it. But the purpose of it is to make sure that the city isn't investing in companies that are contributing to human rights violations. And there was some pretty significant pushback from the community saying, this is a terrible agreement that you've kind of snuck under everybody's noses and that you've signed, and we don't agree with it. And the council did reverse their decision. And so generally the answer is, yes, they have reversed themselves, and yes, they can reverse themselves.
And it requires community demand.
And it requires community demand.
Yes.
Thank you. Entergy should be threatened by an organized campaign to lower rates for public ownership. This is a question I read it as a statement.
Oh, I see.
Public ownership.
Right, or municipal ones, right? So rather than,
To push for public ownership of this public utility.
I see.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, I read one.
So as we know, Entergy is an investor-owned utility, meaning it's traded on the stock market, it's owned by its investors who require a certain kind of profit expectation and a growing profit expectation. What is being described by that card is municipalization, which means that the city itself would own our utility, and therefore there wouldn't be a profit motive. This is something that exists in other cities in Louisiana. For example, Lafayette has a pretty well-run, from what I understand, utility that provides all kinds of services, not just electricity, but also, I think, fiber optic and broadband and all kinds of things. And that I think there are 11 other cities that have municipal utilities that are owned, if you will, by the people. This is absolutely something that the city council and the people could decide to do. It's not a small move, it's a pretty big lift, but if it's something that we decide as a city is in the best interest of all of us, then it's absolutely something we could do.
Very good. Thank you both. And finally, just as final comments, give us one thing that we can do within the next couple of days to fight against what's going on, to fight this corruption, and to make our righteous, just voices heard. What can we do?
Write a letter. You can go down to the first floor of City Hall, file it with the clerk of council. That's an office door that's right before you get to the council chambers, the clerk of council. And in your letter to the clerk of council, make it clear that you're talking about this city council's resolution on Entergy and the penalties and what to do next after this investigative report. And make sure that whatever you put in your comment, whatever you put in your letter, you say withdraw the decision. That's key.
Withdraw the decision.
Withdraw that approval. Yes.
For the approval of the gas plant. All right. Logan, any final words?
If you need more information about either where that office is or other easier ways to file your comments, go find Sophie and get yourself a card so that we can contact you and give you all the information you need.
Very good. Thank you both so much. Can y'all give them a hand clap for being here tonight? Thank you for your time. Thank you for your knowledge and for sharing that with us.